Hello everybody, it's Matthew or Meachew or Peach. I'm going to be doing commentary while playing some games while listening to audio. It is a little bit hectic because I use multiple audio streams, but I think that's kind of what makes my streams a little bit unique, is because I like to make it not like particularly boring, and I think it's pretty cool how I do streams a little bit differently from other people. But that's okay with me. I don't mind it. It's just the way I am, and I figure that if other people want to listen back to it, including me, I have done my own. I can now just go to sleep on my own streams, because the more I realized it is that I kind of just got used to my own voice, and I'm okay now. At first I was shy. I still am, but it's not as severe, and that you kind of just need to get over it, how you sound, and people will like it or hate it or whatever. I don't mind it. So what I have playing on this stream is I've got intelligence. I got like 8 tabs open, so bear with me. It's kind of chaotic. So I'll start playing this one now. The first tab is like intelligence, Jujutsu Kaisen, and other things like debating and whatnot. So that's the first tab. The second tab is lo-fi. I always like playing lo-fi in the background. I think it makes it easier to listen to, and I think my streams are easy on the ears. Easy on the eyes and ears. I'm only playing the videos at 144p because I have multiple streams going on at once, even though I have an unlimited data cap on the internet, and my internet's pretty fast, at least 1 gigabyte speeds. But I still want to try to limit myself if I can, not because for one, part of the reason is slow down, and the other reason is I want to not lag too much in games, and the more stuff you have running in the background, the more RAM you need. Even though I have 24 gigabytes of RAM, I still rather keep it to a minimum. I don't have to, I'd want to. The third tab is listening and watching some Minecraft videos of particularly the limits of Minecraft, the Farlands, the Void, like the End Dimension, the Nether Dimension, and stuff like that. I love watching Ant Venom's videos about the Farlands. And so I have that playing in the background too. I also am listening to stuff like calm streams. That's the fourth tab. And the reason why I have this is because these are streams I have on my playlist on one of them, and I like listening to them because I like calm streams more. That's not to say I don't hate like horror channels. I watch Queso, I watch to a lesser extent Markiplier and people like that. But the reason why I guess streams like mine more is that I don't really overreact to things. In fact, if people who talk to me in like real life, they will see that they will see and know that I'm pretty boring to talk to at times, because I don't talk in a way that's very like I don't sound desperate, or in other words, I don't sound like I want to make a point. I just tell people how I feel and how I think, and people can decipher from there what they think about me. I don't put too much stock into it though, but that's why people find me boring. It's because I don't overreact to things, and I'm not bothered by a lot of things in life. If I had to sum up what my life is that I'm reserved. I try to take things within context. I love Jesus Christ. I think he's God. I'm LDS, and I just a reserved emo brown boy LDS who tries to love others and says that you shouldn't judge all people of the same group the same way, and you should try to use discernment. That's, I think, an important thing is that people they don't try to use discernment. But going to the fifth tab, it is talking about first one is on Taylor Alicia, and she talks about how many people are going to Jesus Christ, many OnlyFans girls are going to God, many celebrities are going to God. And the reason why I like sharing this stuff in the background here, because I think that I still remember God as a part of my life. He's still an important part of it. It's in the 0.2 playlist, and I don't normally have this much tabs on, but again, I am making more of an exception today, just because that I think it's pretty cool. And like I said before, I'm just a different type of person, and I like having my streams a little bit different from the norm, and I also sleep to my own streams. I sleep to my own streams a lot of the time. I like listening to them as white noise, and I'm sure other people do too. Some people have come in my chat, also some of my friends, and I appreciate that. Also, one stream I intend to watch, I go through movies called 12 Angry Men, Akira Kurosawa's Dreams, and Suddenly 1954, starring Frank Sinatra. It's an old movie, and someday I do want to stream all of them in a row, and I do intend to do that movie marathon someday, and I think it would be cool to do that. I think it would be pretty awesome to do. Of course, as I'm listening to lo-fi, and when I say like listen to them, I mean watch them too, because sometimes I'll play games in the background, sometimes I'll just watch the content that I'm listening to, but it all depends on my perspective, depends on my mood, depends on what I want. And yeah, I know some of these videos are kind of weird, but I don't mind it too much. So I'll go to the next tab. The next tab is none other than Oppressador. I love the guy. Even though he isn't the best at Call of Duty, he makes my day better. I think he's hilarious. I think he's funny. He makes listening to COD games fun. In fact, I did a whole marathon that I've uploaded that people can watch and listen to. The reason why I have it really low on him is because people who've watched him knows he can yell pretty loudly and stuff. But that's why I love the guy. I love his COD videos. I love his golf videos. I love Oppressador, even though I criticize gameplay, his personality and attitude for me is it's too good, it's too funny. I can't not watch him, and he makes it better, and I think he makes other people's days better too. So the next tab I've got is listening and watching scary things. I'm kind of a scary nerd. Nothing really scares me in life. I'm bothered by a lot, but I still love listening to it. I still love like listening to scary stuff. I still like watching scary stuff. I like going to sleep, and now with I'm more comfortable with streaming, I'll just incorporate them sometimes into my streams, and I like it. So the seventh tab now is the Cozy Hobbit SPA on a winter night. It has snowfall, warm fireplace, and a hot tub. The reason why I put this on here is because I love listening to white noise as well, and I think it adds more ambience, and I think it adds more flavor to a stream that might be more boring than usual, and I think that's okay if people I think it's okay if people I think it's okay if people I think it's okay if people if they don't if people don't like the white noise and stuff, that's fine for them. But for me, I think it just adds more flavor. I think it adds more variety, and I think white noise and lo-fi blend very well together. And I'm not afraid to do that. Maybe others are. And the last one is I am watching Bohemian Grove videos by Dancer One. I don't know if they're legit or not, but the reason why I have them playing in the background is because I do like a lot of the esoteric occult stuff, even though I'm LDS Mormon, and I don't support the elites or any people doing bad things to bad people or bad things to good people. The reason why I have this playing is because Dancer might be the first one that has extensively filmed it. Now, I'm not saying if it's legit or not. I actually think it is, because they took down his videos on his original YouTube channel, but that doesn't necessarily prove or disprove. But I remember the first time I watched it years ago, and I was flabbergasted of what I not only saw, but I liked how soft it was. Of course, you have to, because it's a security place, highly security. But I love it a lot, and I think that there's nothing wrong. There's just nothing wrong with it. That's part 4. I got these kind of screwed up a little. Part 4. No. Well, maybe one day I will do a marathon of Bohemian Grove by Dancer 1 too. So it doesn't really matter what places I put them on. I think it'll be fine. Okay. Alright, I just want to see. Alright, let's put the lo-fi a little bit down. And the white noise. Alright. I think I am ready to go. It's kind of hard to keep track of all the audio tabs. But that's why I like it though. Alright, let's go play some games. Yeah, this is pretty relaxing. Pretty is. Alright. So let's go in the chat. And if like other people don't join, that's fine. This is for me, and if anybody else wants to join, they can. Or they just say, Matthew, you don't. Your streams are too chaotic. Well, that's kind of the point. I like having chaotic streams. I think they're better for me personally. It's just the way I do have streams. Now, I usually don't have that much stuff playing though. Like, I won't have up to like 8 audio tabs open at once. But sometimes I do. I usually don't. But that's just the way I like it. As I said before, I like my streams a little bit more chaotic than the usual, and I don't see what's a big problem with that. At least for me. If other people have it, that's fine. They can make their own streams, but the thing is, I like making my streams a little bit unique, as I said before. So I'm just gonna play Splitgate. I'm just going to go against bots because I could go against humans, but with the slowdowns and the lag, and I just don't care as much. And I think I'm pretty good at Splitgate. It's just that me personally, I'd rather not go so try hard about it. I mean, I've done very well in the first Splitgate and the second Splitgate. I'm a pretty top player, but as I've said before, I just don't. I don't care to try hard anymore. I've been there and done that. And plus I have a controller that's screwed up. That's why I'm getting a new one right now. But if I have a controller that, if you go to the right, sometimes it will drift over to the left because the sticks that I have do not have the Hall effect yet. Like, they don't have it. I know other some PlayStation 5 controllers have it, but because I use a DualSense right now, some of the like PlayStation 5 controllers, some of the PlayStation 5's controllers, they don't really have They don't have the Hall effect yet, and I don't hate it, but yeah, it's starting to. The controller is starting to show its age, and it's not surprising though because I got it used from GameStop. So people want to say, well, it's your fault. It's like, yeah, it kind of is. I paid a lot of money for it. It's kind of expensive. The controller is good, but it is kind of expensive. But you know, I'll probably say that I'm streaming right now on my like social media. Like, I just don't. I'm not playing that well right now. Part of it is like I'm just tired, and I don't really care to. I don't really care for it to play well right now. Dang, I'm actually doing pretty bad. Doing pretty bad. But the good thing is I'm not experiencing any slowdown. It seems like. So that's not a bad thing. Alright. I'll get the hang of it though. Yeah, see it drifted slightly there. It did drift slightly to the, because sometimes I'll push it to the right and then it goes left. But that's okay. The most I've got kills is like 70 kills in this Splitgate game, and Splitgate 1 game I got like 82 kills or something. It was crazy. That's insane. I love Splitgate more so than Halo. I think that the power-ups and the portals and the equipment make it unique. It's not very popular, but I don't care. It might be one of my favorite arena shooters of all time. It's very easy to play. There's cross-platform play, which means PC and consoles can play together. The game is very lightweight. It's like, as in game file size, the game file size is really small too, and I appreciate that. So I'm doing pretty well now. I'm starting to pick up the pace a little bit. I'm starting to get the hang of it. I'm surprised of how well it's running because it usually doesn't run this well, but you know, it might be because I'm running all the videos at 144p that it's not taking up as much resources and stuff, which is not a bad thing because if it's going to be audio only, you don't need the best sound quality. It's not like watching a film. Well, the better quality is better unless you're going for like a real retro and old school vibe and stuff, which is not a bad thing. I actually think retro pictures and lower quality pictures is better because I think it represents I think low quality is better because it represents it better, what you're trying to get out of it. So it's not a bad thing. And I got 33 kills. Not bad. The most damage. I got quite a bit of captures. I got the lowest at 4, but I came back and did good. I did good for my team. The bots are pretty good in this game though too. They're not like top tier, but that's okay. So I don't know what else I want to talk about. What do I want to talk about? Oh yeah. So I should. So yeah, there was more people. If people don't want to talk or leave, that's fine. One stream, I've had 14 live viewers once, and there's nothing wrong with it. Of course, uh, they really didn't interact, but I'm not. I'm not trying to be a big person. I don't have a lot of charisma IRL, in real life or online. I'm just not that type of person, and I think people are different, but that's okay too. You know, people should try to not force to be something you're not. Don't push trying to be something you're not. If you're always authentic with yourself and you always tell the truth about yourself or how you feel about other things, you won't have to worry about telling the truth because you're not. You haven't contaminated yourself with lies. People, you know, they fall into groupthink, and I've seen it a lot of times online where they will fall into groupthink. They'll say something, but then they'll be totally hypocritical, and then they'll say other things about it just so that they can still be popular and still appeal to external validation that in the end might not even fully agree with them. It's because they need to see seen better as their peers because otherwise they're going to be shunned. It's a very, very cult behavior. And I'll give you kind of an example. You have a whole bunch of people who, you know, they're white nationalists. They say they love Hitler, but and they say they don't really like black people that much, which is fine. I think it's a fair assessment, but it's not entirely accurate because you can still point out the hypocrisy of other people while still admitting that, you know, your worldview, your beliefs can have problems. You can like someone and still admit that the person you idolize or believe in still has a lot of problems. You know, people have this Dunning-Kruger effect that they think that just because they think someone's cool or whatever, that they always have to listen to said guy. And I think that's it's very weird, and it's very inconsistent. It's not coherent. So, but as I was saying before I derided myself, and I do that a lot sometimes. I lose my train of thought. But trying to go back on topic a little bit. You can't, because for example, a lot of people are not they're not consistent about Hitler. They say Hitler was a great leader, which I do believe, but he wasn't perfect. They're misconstrued the argument too. They're misconstrued what he means. Like he says, well, look, Hitler loved humans. He banned human animal cruelty. He loves animals. Doesn't that mean that he's a good person? And it's like, no, because for one, he poisoned his dog, and people say, well, he poisoned his dog so that he wouldn't be collateral damaged and used by the Russians once Hitler lost the, I think either the Operation Barbarossa, I believe, or something like that. Either way, they say that Hitler poisoned his dog so that nothing bad, his dog wouldn't face the cruelty of the Russians. The problem with that is that they're inserting a conclusion they have no way of knowing. And I get the point, because you don't always want to believe the propaganda of your enemy, But the issue isn't that. The issue is that they're still presupposing that it has to be the case for Hitler to poison his dogs because he doesn't want it to be, cruel on, which is again ironic because he did show a lot of cruelty to others. He wasn't consistent. He had drug problems, and people could be cruel to him about that. I won't. I'm just saying that people could use that as an argument. There's really not a lot people can go against him other than saying, well, based on my presupposition of Hitler, it is better to kill the dog out of mercy. It's a mercy killing, so because he loved animals, which I believe. I think he did love animals, but it was a mercy killing. That's what people think. That's what they say. White nationalists and Hitler fanatics will say, well, look, he killed his dog so that the dog wouldn't be cruelized against, which is possible. It is possible that could be the case, but the problem is that again we have no way of knowing that can be the case. So rather than trying to think objectively, that just because that you perceive that your side is better and that your side would never lie, just because you rule out option one, you rule out premise one, that maybe Hitler didn't kill it out of mercy, but he just wanted to poison it because he thought the Russians would torture it. But if you take that position, you have to support a lot of evidence, and there isn't a lot of evidence that one can say that the Russians would torture his dog. So I reject the first premise or the first claim that just because something seems to be the case doesn't mean it is the case. Just because something seems the case doesn't necessarily mean it is the case. It's just you're just putting your feelings and presuppositions into that. Even if you're being biased, even if you think you aren't being biased, there's still biasism there in any case. There's still biasism there, even if people don't really want to believe it, because you can say you're either completely for Hitler, and that judges, if you're completely for something, you better make sure that thing is perfect and not vacuous, and he wasn't. Many Hitler fans know it. I could go into how Jews maybe financed him. He's in the Epstein files. They say he's not. He is. There's a lot of other things too that are very, they're not consistent. Even within the Epstein files, he is in the Epstein files. He wasn't. I don't think he was particularly the god that people think he is. He wasn't the white savior. He killed a whole bunch of white people. People say, oh, well, he would never get with the black people, but he had people of multiple races in his army. They say stuff like, well, Hitler had a whole bunch of, he had good people. He was good to kids, which he was. But that doesn't mean that it lets you off the hook. People aren't so black and white, and people really think the only thing white nationalists who love Hitler and think he's basically the white savior, and he wasn't. He was a drug-riddled person who had a lot of faults. But people think that because for some reason Hitler, they think he's some sort of almost perfect person, and that can't be the case either. People just make it up of what he wants. That's only because people are very self-biased, as I said before. But as I was saying before, going back to before Hitler was, before I said Hitler was a hypocritical drunk who actually wasn't as maybe as cool as people think. People have this misconception that everything has to be black and white about everything. You're either fully for Hitler and fully against Hitler. I think he did some good things. I think Hitler did some bad things, and I think he was a self-righteous hypocrite who was inconsistent. And now I don't mean to judge all people of the same group the same way, but the reason why discernment is so powerful in context is because it allows you to get down to not only the semantics so we can know what we're arguing about or against in a specific way, but people will tend to have cognitive dissonance, so they pick and choose what they think is true, and so they can view their side more favorably. And I would say this a little bit about black people, and I'll say this about people of LDS lore and Zionism as well. Nazis. When I've debated Nazis or Hitler fans, it goes. A lot of it is just appealing to emotion, and it's appealing to a guy, Hitler, who was charismatic. I think he was actually a good leader at times in specific areas. It's just that if you don't think he's almost Mr. Perfect, if you don't think he's the white savior, then there must be a problem with you. Even though he wasn't, he actually did kill a whole bunch of white people. He thought Slavs, and he thought Slavs and Slavs were not white, or at least less than white. And I think that he also said that Polish were not, they weren't seen as white, and he killed a whole bunch of them. What people don't understand, white nationalists and Hitler fanatics don't understand, is that Hitler killed a whole bunch of white people, and there was also the T4 Action experience. He also, I think he knocked up a 14-year-old Eva Braun or something like that. And a lot of people say, oh well, he would never do the stuff that Epstein stuff he did. He would always be good to you. Yeah, if you want his good side and you believed a whole bunch of stuff that he did, then sure, because it makes him look better. But that doesn't mean that everything about him is but that doesn't mean that like everything about Hitler was like fine and dandy. It wasn't. Because if you're going to sit there and say that, oh, Hitler, he never harmed kids, he never raped them, he never allowed bad people in his army, that's not true either. He advocated for a lot of bad stuff, as I said before, the T4 Action. He killed a whole bunch of his own people. Even if you want to say the Holocaust is fake or real, to me, I would say that's less irrelevant, because he wasn't consistent. He's not the white savior, as people think. He had a lot of faults. He had a lot of charisma and good qualities about him, but he's not God. He has a lot of mistakes. And you can be a white nationalist and a Nazi and still admit that, Hitler's just not perfect the way people think. I don't understand why this is so hard for people to grasp or understand, is because they think like it always has to be black and white, and I don't know why people keep saying that. They just think it's black and white all the time, 24/7, and you can be a part of a group and still admit that you don't believe everything in said group. And as I said before, I said I would go through Zionists. I said I would go through my own groups. But let's just go to Zionism first. Well, without being maybe too anti-Semitic, because I actually do try to love Jews. I think people should try to love everyone no matter what. And as I said before, you have to use discernment. But a lot of people, Christians, they think that Zionism or the Israel in the Bible is the same Israel as in the Bible, and it's not true. The Israel that was made and the Israel that is in the Bible is not the same Israel as currently. The Israel currently is the Israel from the 1900s. That's not the same Israel. The Israel of today isn't the Israel of the Bible. And how I know this, because Israel isn't just a place. It's not just a piece of land. Israel is Jesus Christ. The true Israel is Jesus Christ and his followers. And a lot of people say, well, you got to support Israel because you have to support Israel because supporting Israel is in the Bible. That is true. But they're doing a word concept fallacy game. They think that the word can only mean one thing, and the same word can have multiple meanings. It's the word concept fallacy, or maybe it's not the word concept fallacy. I don't know what it is, but it's basically saying that one word can only have one meaning, and that's not the case. The word God can have multiple meanings. The word Allah can have multiple meanings. That's why you need to go into specifics and semantics. That's what I think Andrew Wilson, Jay Dyer, people like that, they do so well, and that's why they're revered as the debaters. Ben Shapiro included, Nick Fuentes, and then people like that. I think that one would have to really stretch it in place to say that God can't. I think one has to really stretch it to say what God can and can't do, or what we should believe. But yeah, Zionist Jews, many Zionist Jews think that the Israel of today is the Israel of the Bible, and I don't think they're the same at all. Yes, I do think God has abandoned the Jews, but I think more so the Jews abandoned him. In Zechariah it says that the Jews will mourn for the one who pierced the sight. Now whether it's either metaphorical, physical, or both, or symbolic, we can't tell, but it just seems like it's all pointing to Jesus Christ. Is also prophesied in Isaiah. Jesus says, Moses wrote about him. And I don't think Jesus would like that the God's chosen people, the Jews, many of them, this is going to sound a little bit harsh, but people need to know what they're backing. Zionist Jews, I think, run a caliphate. They run the government and a shadow government. They're very smart, they're very rich, they're very powerful, they're very persuasive, they're good liars, but I think people need to understand that You can be a Jew and still not admit to it. And I don't understand it either. So I would say that yes. I would say that Jesus would be against Zionism. It would be against Jews. Like Jesus, he wouldn't necessarily be against Jews themselves, but he would be against the people who claim that they're doing the right of God, but then blowing, children up. And then they try to justify the lies to go to war so they can cover it up. It's lies on top of lies on top of lies. I'm not saying that to hate Jews. I think it's a very bad thing that many Jews are against because they're simply Jews and they believe what they believe. It's just ironic because people will say, well, Jews run everything and they don't like to be questioned, but you could turn the same thing that a lot of Hitler fans would say, and you point out the consistencies, and for some reason their hypocrisy is okay, but not your hypocrisy, or they can't say why hypocrisy is bad, other than they're just saying, well, I don't like it, and F you, but they don't really have arguments against the rebuttal. They don't have a logical rebuttal, and then they point it out, they get angry. They really shouldn't, though, because there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it that a lot of people, I just think a lot of people need to be honest with themselves. I don't think it's good to be a Zionist, and I think a lot of Christians may misinterpret what it means, or they misinterpret the Bible. They don't take it within context because otherwise that would not be good look for them. So again, it's the cognitive dissonance working. You can see the cognitive dissonance working again. Because if you debate them on this, and a lot of people don't debate for that very reason, because they know they can't really defend it. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, their position is right or necessarily wrong, but it's more so that deep down they know that their position might not be consistent, or they can't contend with it as much as they want. That could be the fallacy. Just because you defend a position badly doesn't make said position false. But in this case, I think it is, because as I've said before, people conflate the Israel of the Bible to the Israel of now. And it's not a good thing to mess up. It's not a good thing to mess up. I think it's not a good thing. I think it's not a good thing, though. People need to, watch out. They just need to be careful. They need to use discernment. Don't try not to hate anybody of any beliefs. Just try to point out the hypocrisy. Try to be gentle. Try to tell the truth, but don't do it in a condescending way. Try to tell the truth in love, and try to be rational. Try to be reasonable, even if it comes to your own beliefs. So I think that there's a lot of problems with Zionism. I think there's a lot of problems with the Zionist Jews. I think they control a whole bunch. And I think Christians who promote Zionism, they say a lot of stuff that they can't defend, and if they were to get into a debate with any competent debater, they would lose because they get on the Muslims, but they don't get on the Jews. They think Muslims are okay, or a lot of them. Well, they don't think it's okay, but some people say, well, look at the Muslims also. It's almost whataboutism. It's like, look at the Muslims also. They believe in the divinity of Jesus, so therefore they're better. But a lot of that is just a mask to hide that a lot of, Islam is very, very anti-democracy. They're very anti-woman. They're anti a lot of things. And people want to have very much fun as they think. The only thing you can say about is that while they think Jesus is divine or Messiah or prophet, but they don't go farther than that, and they think that that's a slam dunk against Zionist Jews. But Israel has a lot of brings a lot of problems. Muslims bring a lot of problems. Islam brings a lot of problems. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of work, and I think there's a lot of self-righteous hypocrisy there. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the next thing, the black thing. Yes, I'm black, but I've been very outspoken. I've said that black people should try to become, try to self-improve themselves. I think they should try to have more self-control. And a big issue that a lot of black people in the black community, they don't seem to want to admit that a lot of people in the black community will not admit that. A lot of people in the black community don't want to admit that. They don't want to admit that on average, the law of averages, on average per capita, black people are more violent, they're more prone to violence, they do more violence, and I'm not saying that in a condescending way or anything, but I'm more so saying that that's the reality, that's the case, and a lot of black people, my race, at the very least, they will make excuses. They'll try to justify it, say how, look how bad people treated white people, treated black people in the past. Look at how many white people are responsible for slavery. And yeah, that's true. Some of that did happen. The issue is that most white people did not have slaves. They couldn't afford them. Slaves were very expensive. And there was a lot of black people who held slaves even before white people. White people did it. That's not to say that's not an excuse, but I think we need more context. If you're going to blame white people for the things they did in the past against people who had no ways of might not even hold those views, you shouldn't generalize people into groups like for white people. Most white people are not slave owners. Most white people probably don't even hate black people. And a lot of the issues I think in the black community are very self-inflicted. And what do I mean by that? Well, as I've said before, blaming other people just because some people in the past did something to your ancestors, which we might not even know could be justified if they were like murderers or something. Not excusing it, I'm just saying that could be the case, because there's I think a lot of media bias, and I think there's a lot of media bias today against white people to make them look worse than they actually are, and that's a lot of propaganda. I think a lot of the issue is that black people are like allergic to, I think black people on average are allergic to accountability and they try to justify it saying, well, look, we need reparations and stuff. But the thing is, I'm black and I've really never had a problem with much of anybody. A lot of people do not like people who are obnoxious, judgmental, and they don't know when to be humility and accept. They don't know how to accept. No, they don't know context. It's all emotional appeals, and I think that's it's a very bad thing to argue from that vantage point because you're not going to be objective about it. And the objection is black people do commit more crime on average than any other race on average. They're more, it's kind of like saying black people on average are just faster runners than white people. I think some of it is genetics. Some of it is hard work. Some of it is just genetics. Black people have higher bone density on average than other races. Black people age better on average than other races too, because of the melanin, because of the calcium in the bones, because of the strong bones, because of the melanin, which allows the body to recover quicker. We don't sunburn as easily as white people, and I don't even fully agree with white people on but I just like to say the facts. But the facts are white people do a lot less violence on average than other races. I'm going to say it, and I'm going to give them positives too, and on the law of averages. I don't base the law of average on how well you should treat people and stuff. I think that would be a huge misnomer, and I think it would be bad. But in terms of saying the truth about races and about beliefs and other things, I think we should try to be more discernment. We should try to be more fair. I think it's very fair to say that I don't hate my own race, but I just want them to self-improve, and I want them to try to have self-control and self-improve of themselves, while still maintaining I love my own race. I love black people, I love white people, I love all kinds of people. I love non-believers and believers alike, because I don't judge people of the same group the same way. That really is what it comes down to. You can't judge people of the same group the same way, and you should try to not bring self-bias into it. I do love my own race, but for some reason, people assume that I don't. But just assuming the conclusions based on claims or statements without context. That's why context and semantics are very important. And when you explain this to people, they look at you funny, they look at you like you have three heads, only because you simply explain to them why this could just be the case, or why this is the case, or how it's the case. You don't even need a why, it's just pragmatic. So I just want better behavior from the black community. But black people have also shown amazing resilience too. I think it's unfortunate that a lot of people label black people together, but black people do it to themselves, and they do it to other races. All in all, we should all try to get along. I know that sounds cliche, but it really is true. We should try to get along no matter the beliefs or the race, and you should try to use discernment, because if you don't, you're going to be caught in a loop that will be biased against your own. It will be biased against your own inner beliefs, and you're going to lose it. So people, I think, need to be really, really, really careful about their own beliefs. They don't need to be careful about their own beliefs. But they should just try to not uh, let it control them. You know, as I've said with the black community, uh, I believe sometimes that a lot of people in the black community, especially in Africa, they are going against corrupt governments. They're going against corrupt governments. They're going against corrupt people. They're going against corrupt. They're just going against corrupt governments. They're going against corrupt people. And, sometimes I think it's not fair to hold people accountable for the, not necessarily for the beliefs that they hold, because sometimes people are just born into a indoctrinated belief system, and even if they get out of it, they still apply that doctrine of beliefs to said lives, even if they get out of it. So, and the reason why is because propaganda, brainwashing, and let's face it, we all have some sort of it, because we're all biased to some degree. Even me, even if I say I'm still biased to my own inner. I have a bias to my own inner, understanding, my own subjective consciousness, which can't possibly apply to all of the reality, objective reality, if there even is one. But as I said before, people just need to be careful about judging others before they talk to them. They should be careful about, judging people and taking people out. That's really one of the issues. Also, is that people take a lot of people out of context. They either take you out of context and they judge people the same group the same way. That's basically what I'm saying, and I think people should try not to do that. Because for their own sake, if they don't try to limit themselves, then I think they're going to make huge problems. They're gonna have a huge problem. But yeah, that's about it for the black thing. I think wanting self-improvement from your own, whether it's your own race or your own beliefs, is not a bad thing, but it's also not a bad thing to not be self-righteousness or not judge people the same group the same way, and use discernment too, because otherwise, as I've said before in the Hitler case and the black people case, people are just going to take you out of context and run to their own inner bias that validates them. And that's why a lot of people like to stay in that's why a lot of people like to stay in groups, because it validates their self-biasness. It validates them, and so they don't want to leave, even though groupthink, I don't think is necessarily a good thing. I don't know if it's always bad, but it's not necessarily a good thing. And I think people need to be really careful with that. So I talked about blacks, I talked about Hitler, I talked about Zionism. So now I would talk about LDS. I think this is the important one, because I think a lot of people get LDS wrong, but I think a lot of LDS Mormons get it wrong. So first thing that I'm going to clarify now is that the LDS Mormons and the LDS Church has never been racist. I know that sounds weird, but here's why I think I can remedy this. If that was the case, that for one, we have to look at what it means, because the reason why I don't look at it as racist, because people take the scriptures, the LDS scriptures, out of context, they take the turning brown skin context out of context. They say the Lamanite stuff is out of context. They take a lot of stuff out of context that I think is very bad. People, proponents against it take it out of context. For example, I love Jay Dyer. I love his debate style. He's one of the best. I've learned a lot. I actually learned a lot how to debate, apologetics and stuff, presuppositions from watching him and Andrew and Jim Bob, Chase, and people like that. And, they kind of just tore their opponents to shreds. But in this case, I have to disagree with them. For no other reason than it's a misrepresentation. So let me get into it. Jay Dyer on the Hodge twins basically said, well, God is racist towards black people because, the Cain, the seed of Cain, people think that it applies to all black people. That's not true. Also, if God was a racist, why would he allow people in the plan of salvation in the first place when he didn't have to create them in the first place? It just doesn't make any sense. Because it's already a contradiction, because it's like, well, God's racist, but he's going to make people that he knows people will take out of context, and he's racist, but he's just gonna make people that are like racist or something, and he's gonna say, yeah, you're going to compete in my 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 plan, but I'm going to make you, because I'm a racist, but I'm going to make you one of my greatest people. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of blessings, and people are going to take you out of context. It's the Lamanites, it's the Cain stuff. The stuff about the Lamanites, it says, well, the curse, because God cursed them with black skin because they turned away from him, not realizing that the black skin isn't even, the black skin wasn't the curse. Because if it was, then I wouldn't be able to be blessed now. I think I am. And a whole bunch of black people wouldn't be able to do it either. The Cain stuff is just wrong because, again, people make one instance and then apply it to, they make one instance and then they apply that to the whole, and that's just black and white group thinking. It's biased again. And people, oh, well, it's racist. It doesn't bother me that people are racist. I've had people say they come up to me at this end, said the N-word with the ER, and I don't really care because I try to stay on topic. It doesn't bother me. They're just words. And I remain unflappable, and that's why people find me boring to talk to because, or debate me, because I don't take the rage bait. They can't bait me into raging or talking or taking the bait. So they can't really do anything against me. And so the other thing too is that people will put their own biases into whatever it is that they think it is, and they don't have a second thought about it. But the Lamanite stuff, the Cain stuff, it doesn't add up, because if you look at the scriptures later, it says in Revelation that all people of all beliefs and religions and faiths will come together in Jesus Christ to say Jesus is Lord and Savior. And it's like every kingdom shall bow and every tongue confess. It wasn't, I don't think he is for like the elect stuff, as some Calvinism people think, or maybe Protestants think. But, people say, oh, he came for the elect. Now that word can mean different things. If you're talking about people who accept Jesus Christ, then sure. However, it cleverly doesn't state that the elect can't be all people. Because if every knee shall bow and every tongue confess, then there is a case, I think, for universalism. And I think that's what's cool about Christianity is not a one-size-fits-all. A whole bunch of people can become to Christianity, and I think that's why Jesus is a highly respected figure. Even people who don't believe him, they respect him as a historic figure because he loved the non-believers, he loved the outcasts, he loved females, enough so much so that he went to a female first after his resurrection just so it can give more credence to women. He loved women, and I don't understand the whole anti-woman stuff. Even as a joke, I just think it's weird. But in that case, yeah, the black skin stuff and either the LDS scriptures or just the Bible scriptures or Christianity scriptures, because many people think that LDS people are Christians. Which it's their right to think that way too. It's just that I don't think it's a very good argument, but people think that they can think that if they want. So based on another thing too. So yeah, people take the black stuff way out of context. The thing about the Jews and stuff. The thing about the Jews and stuff like that is that well, not the Jews, but the black people, is that the black skin itself is not the curse. The curse is from God, and the black skin was just used to delineate or to differentiate the Lamanites and the Nephites. It says dark skin. You could use the word for black, dark, darkened. I think it's but the black skin was not cursed because the Lamanites and the Nephites looked so alike. I believe they're the native tribes during the Americas. But people think that black skin, that means God is a racist. Oh, another thing too, but that's been, I think, debunked. The Cain stuff is also debunked because you could just use the same arguments for the Nephites as, against Cain. I use them interchangeably. God cursed him with black skin, and black skin is the curse, but God blesses black people every day, and I don't see how if God was racist, he would curse black people with black skin. I just think that's propaganda to get a reaction, which it does. People, a lot of it is bait, I think, or it's just a misunderstanding. And I pointed it out to white people before. It's like, hey, you guys better, you better watch out because you could be misinterpreting it. But that's the issue with the scriptures, that people can interpret it many different ways. And if you interpret it many different ways, you're going to lose the context, meaning you're going to bring your own biases into that. And that's why I said at the start of this is that people need to be careful about it. They need to be careful to not bring their own bias into it, because if they do, they're going to be dissatisfied with it. And so people need to they need to watch themselves a little bit. But I don't think it's necessarily wrong though. And so with the black skin stuff, either with the Cain stuff, which is wrong, because in Revelation it says people of all different groups and beliefs will get together. That's wrong. Black people are not the Chris and the Cain stuff. The Lamanites, that was only to separate the Lamanites and the Nephites physically. The Chris itself was the cutoff from. It's more so that they didn't have themselves with God, not the black skin, because if you look at later, the Lamanites are actually more faithful than the Nephites. Well, if God is such a big racist as people claim in the against being the LDS scriptures, as people think, why would God bless black people who he supposedly hates if he was racist? Why would he bless the Lamanites with more than the Nephites? Because the Lamanites were being more righteous to God and they were pleasing him. So there, people just need to be careful with that. Also, debunking the myth that the LDS is racist. That's not true either. Yeah, black people weren't officially allowed to hold the priesthood until the 1970s, but people are mixing up the interpretation with the theology. Just because the theology says something doesn't mean that that's what it is actually saying, because you need a lot of nuance, you need a lot of, and beliefs like that, you need a lot of context. You need a lot of context. You need a lot of context, because if you don't have context, you're going to, again, run to false conclusions that you can't possibly prove without, interpreting it from a self-biased state. And I think it's very sad and very suspicious that people would do that. So, going back to the priesthood stuff, black people at its conception during the 1800s, when the LDS began under Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, black people were always allowed to be in the church. And the theology, people saying, well, God ordained them, he didn't have, people being allowed to be priests until the 1970s. But I think that's a misnomer too. But before I get into that, people will strong arm or they dance around the issue that, oh well, the LDS Church did not allow black people until the 1970s, but that's not true either. Black people were allowed to be in the church, as I said before, since its conception, but that doesn't mean that they were allowed the priesthood. However, there is an exception to that. If you look up someone called Elijah Abel and Joseph Smith gave Elijah Abel the priesthood a lot sooner, in the 1800s. It was not very well documented, but it is valid. Elijah Abel, he got the priesthood, and he was an exception. But that doesn't mean that it was official, but it does prove that there were black people, exceptional black people, were getting the priesthood during the 1800s. It just wasn't official. And I think it wasn't really to do with races. I don't think it has much, well, maybe it does have much to do with racism, but I don't think that's the fullness reason why that's the case. For one, I think it was just during the times You could say, well, they just did it because that's the way they did it. And it's not because they didn't love them, because they didn't even have to offer black people at all. And they did allow black people to join the church in its genesis, in its beginning. So it can't be true that, it just can't be possibly true that that black people were not allowed in. They just weren't allowed to officially hold the priesthood, but that doesn't mean that black people didn't get the priesthood or the power to do all that stuff. It's just it was exceptionally rare, but it did happen. There are claims. And the other claims that Joseph Smith or Brigham Young hated black people or were racist, I think is a misnomer too. They did not hate black people. Brigham Young, I think, is a stronger case. But if they hated black people wouldn't be able to allow to do what they actually did now. They wouldn't be allowed to be able to do anything. They wouldn't be allowed to participate in God's glory or bring Him glory, or they wouldn't be allowed to go against Him. And so it doesn't make sense on its feet. It doesn't make sense when you look at it. It does not make sense at all. People just need to stop being biased again and understand the context and understand the reason why. Also, another thing is that people conflate the beliefs, the fallible beliefs, with the theology. I could just say that people misinterpret theology. They misinterpret theology with the arguments of the theology itself. Just because some people interpret the theology a certain way, where it says, or where they think that black people are not as capable as other races, or that God is biased against them. That's not the theology saying that. That's the interpretation of theology saying that. That's the interpretation of people. They're not always so interconnected as people think. So people have to, I think, be very careful. Another thing I see people in terms of their beliefs is that they, and I'm going to get into apologetics, they argue from incredulity. They say, well, if everything is subjective, or if God is a subject, He must be subjective. Because if subjective means mind independent, then how can they say, oh, well, God has to be greater because why would you look at that? God has to, essentially be greater, because how else could it be that way? There's no way that it could be the case. There's no way that it could be the case that God can just simply do things that your brain can't understand and still be consistent. Just because you can't understand the logic of God fully does not mean God can't do something or that it's invalid. So, for example, people say that the transcend argument. Now, I don't think transcend argument gets to God, but basically the transcendental argument says X is the necessary precondition of Y therefore X. But it doesn't, because they say, well, just using something does not prove the set thing in question. I think, therefore, I am or I exist is a non-statement, because You still haven't proven the thing in question. You're just proving the thing that you use, or the thing that you call God or transcendental. So it's like, just because you could argue that no other way can solve it, so that it must be a God, because the transcendentals must be grounded in a universal mind, doesn't prove the thing in question. It proves you use it, and it proves that other people that do use it do not have a justification for how or why they can use it. They use transcendental arguments to justify morality or anything, but they don't understand that it's not an argument against said thing. And I don't think you can disprove God by using transcendental arguments, metaphysics, and transcendental categories to say that that because you use things that you can't account for, God must be real, or the lack thereof. But the issue here, though, is that people who subscribe that morality is subjective can't really say why genocide is bad, other than consensus, which is a fallacy, appealing to the self, which is a fallacy because you can't know what the self is. You can't actually prove that, and even if you did have a self, you wouldn't be able to prove it because you would be determined by deterministic reality that you had no part of or say of, or you were just thrown in there, but you would have no way to know because you would be determined to just use your mind in a way that you wouldn't be able to justify. But that doesn't mean that it's, as I said, it's not a one-to-one. It's not a one-to-one base. And I think people need to be careful about saying, well, if you use it, but you can't justify it, then you use something you can't justify. And I think the tag argument is good. I think there's a lot of holes. People bring up the David Hume stuff about can you get an out from it is. So if I was going to if I was going to say something against the tag, is that it puts people on the back foot. It presupposes God, because it presupposes that you must need a justification or a mind that you must need a mind that's universal to give you in power, and universal and like understanding, so that the mind giver, or the giver, God, Jesus Christ, these things, this God can give you the transcendental categories. Therefore, God has to be the case because you use stuff you can't justify. And I do think it is a pretty good argument. Problem is that it shifts the burden of proof on the defender going against him, because the Christians can just say, see, since you don't have a justification for the things you use, or the things that you believe in and we do, ours is more powerful and it proves God. Well, I don't think that proves God. It just proves that you use it, because I think it's actually ironic when this happens. A tag proponent will say that that just because you use something does not mean you have the source of the justification for where you got the thing, or how you use it, or what it is. But at the same time, if the mind is fallible, and the people, proponents of tag, are fallible too, in a way that they wouldn't be able to know or understand, then the they're kind of the tag proponents, the transcendental argument for God. They're kind of just giving them an out and saying, well, we can justify them and we can just ground them in God because God is the only one logical conclusion. We can see God has to be. They conclude that God is real because the other paradigms cannot give an account of justification without appealing to some universal, that they have no justification and trying to ground those universal categories that they use in. But the problem with this is that they're trying to use a standard that the atheists are not allowed to use, but they do. Because an atheist could, or a non-believer could just come around and say, yeah, I use stuff I can't justify, but you're saying that just because we use something does not mean that proves a said thing. But the issue is just that they're coming from a finite standpoint and saying God must be the case because we all use stuff. My word you can justify it, yours can't. So therefore, because mine can justify my paradigm and it can justify my beliefs, and yours cannot justify it, then mine must be more correct. The problem is they're concluding God, and they have no way to know that God is true. They're just proving that other people use them, and they can't justify it from their paradigm or worldview. But just because others use stuff from your paradigm that they can't justify them doesn't necessarily prove that your paradigm is necessarily correct. I think that this is a big issue with proponents of tag. They just give themselves an out and they say, well, you can't actually prove that God can't be real because you're arguing with things you can't justify. You're arguing with stuff you cannot justify in your worldview because you don't have a grounder to put them in, but we do, and that proves our position more. And I would be fine with that. The problem is that they want to go a step further and they think that proving tag is proving God, but they just prove that those people use it, that those people use stuff without justification, not realizing that this argument they make against others can be used against themselves. A tag proponent will say that proponents of tag will say, well, people use justification. They use stuff that they can't justify in the worldview because you can't ground it in the finite mind. So there must be a universal mind, but you're using stuff you can't justify. And if there is no free will, and if you're just a human, you're using stuff from our paradigm that you can't justify, but not vice versa. And we can ground them, we can justify what we use. You can't justify what we use. Therefore, ours is to, and it proves God. Not realizing that someone could just turn around and say, wow, you're using stuff, you're saying that other people can't justify it because you're trying to ground these transcendental categories in this God thing, God character, and you're saying because you can just try to justify in a universal mind and the other people can't, you're not only saying that your paradigm and claims are proved, but your paradigms and claims are proving the thing in question. And it's sort of like begging the question. They just assume that God must be the case because it can grant all of these transcendental categories because they have a justification and the other ones don't. But the tag proponents or proponents of tags, arguers for this position, don't realize that they're not proving the thing in question. They're not proving God. They're just proving that other people use them, but they can justify in a universal mind, and in their mind, the people who don't believe in a universal mind can't, because they use things that they can't justify. But to me, using the thing that can't justify isn't the problem. It's not a matter of whether you can justify it. Well, I think to some degree it is. But you could just say that just because I use stuff from my worldview that I can't justify, and you can use stuff from your worldview that you can justify because you grounded in God, doesn't prove God. It just proves that other people can't justify it. So they proponents of tag put their opponents on the back foot before it even starts. Now, that's not to say everyone doesn't have circularity or presuppositions or Gripper's trilemma, because at the end of the day, all arguments are circular. And even if you want to say an argument is more coherent, and I do believe a lot of transcendental arguments they are coherent, because they say they can ground it in something that the other ones can't ground it in because they believe in a justification and the other one doesn't. But that's not the issue. The justification and coherence and the fact that other people use it, that they can't justify or be coherent in, does not prove the coherence, does not prove this thing itself. It just proves that other people use them. It just proves that people use them. It proves that people are not coherent, they're not consistent, they don't know how, they don't know why, they can't justify it, why they would use something that another paradigm say they can justify, but the other ones cannot justify it. But I still think this is almost a red herring. It's not completely a bad argument. I think tag has taught me a lot. It's just that it just seems almost hypocritical, because they're putting tag, the people against tag, already on the back foot, because it almost makes it seem like they are almost forcing people to agree with them on the transcendentals and metaphysics. But this is where it gets tricky and crafty. The whole thing with tag, if proponents of tag, I think, are arguing it during this way, they'll say that tag proves God, and I don't think it does. All tag does is it proves that people use something that all tag proves is that people use stuff they can't justify, people use stuff they can't justify, they use metaphysics, they use transcendentals, two things they cannot justify, they use a lot of it they cannot justify, and the other ones can, and they put it to a universal God, and therefore God must be the case, because only a transcendental mind is that. The problem with this is that it instantly almost shuts down any coherent, like any other position. See, it's either you have a justification for using things or you don't. You either have a universal coherence justification or you don't, and because you don't, then God must be the case. They're just saying that God must be true because we use these things and there's justification and coherency from it, and the other ones can't. But it almost shifts the burden on the defender, because they're already on the back foot. The defender can say, yeah, I use these things and I cannot justify them, but that doesn't prove the thing in question. These things do not prove God. They just prove that you use something, a category that you have no justification for. It's just very strange that they will apply that something must be there because the other ones cannot claim justification. They don't know the God. They're basically saying God must be the case because you use everything that I do. It's just I have a justification in a universal mind. You don't. And so therefore, because I do and you don't, and we use the same stuff and maybe even the same coherency, it's just that I push mine onto God and you can't. God must be the case because I am able to universal mind. But the thing is, both of these people have not, the proponents of tags still have not justified how or why God must be the grounding of these. Why must a universal something do it? And they kind of say, well, it must be the case because it's simply God must be universal, or they say stuff like, well, yours can't and mine can, so therefore I'm right, and therefore if I'm right, then God must be there. They're not proving God, they're just proving that whether you can give a coherent consistency of justifying what you use or whether you're not. You can just say that you can justify a lot of things that you use, and you can just say, well, I justify my thing in using it. I don't think it's a good argument. I think it's very bad that someone could say that. Or someone can say, well, even if I don't have a justification, you do have a justification for what we use and what's coherent. That does not prove the coherent justification of appealing to a universal mind does not mean that the universal mind itself exists. They're trying to appeal to something that they might not actually have access to. It's like, how do you have access to truth? And I do think God exists. I think it exists. But people they're just not being coherent or consistent. I think a lot of tag people do it too. I think it's wrong, and I think people need to be willing that even if something is true, like it's kind of like saying that just because a claim is true doesn't mean your conclusions of said claim are true. Like, you can be correct about something and still not be correct about the conclusion, because it's proponents of tag just say, well, basically saying God is the universal category. God is the grounding of everything that we use and do, and He's the coherent justification of what we use, and the other ones can't. Therefore, God. But at the same time, even if that's not the case, there could be another position that we don't know about, but they're not even willing to have their mind open. I think that some of the times they like, I don't think presupposition is bad or wrong. I think it's very good, but I had to think about it. It's the same thing for a while and say, maybe I shouldn't always fully believe and take a step back. Same thing with the LDS belief system. I personally believe that God made the universe of eternal matter or matter that he created. Now that may sound weird because I reject ex nihilo, but I don't reject it for the reasons why people think I do. Because most Mormons say God can't create the universe from nothing. God can't create the universe from nothing, so because God has to be like logic or whatever. The problem with this argument I see from a lot of my own, and this is why I'm going to criticize my own belief system, Mormons, LDS, Church of Latter-day Saint followers. I'm just going to say, just because I believe it does not mean that that's exclusive. For example, it's very possible to say that God can do things that we might not be able to comprehend or understand or get to the bottom of. So you can say stuff like, well, I don't believe God can create a square circle. I don't believe God can create the universe from nothing, but it has to be this way because I think a lot of the Mormon arguments boil down to if God created everything from nothing with no choice, is that we can't have free will if God created everything from nothing without a choice. And I do think to some extent that is true, and I think that's why it's a big argument, is how can you have true freedom or free will, if you will, if if you have a universal God who is all-knowing, all-powerful, omnibenevolent, everywhere. How can you have true free will? Because everything is a reaction to something else. And if God is the ultimate, how can you not in some way be determined by God? Even if God gave you free will. Like, I don't believe that being all-knowing means you can't have free will. I think it's an argument from incredulity when people say that. I think it's an argument from incredulity to say God can't do something because you can't envision it logically, or just because logic works in a certain way for us to understand, or for there to be consistent, like in math, for example, does not mean that the same logic can be applied to God. It's very possible that there could be a higher dimension of math and you just not know it, and that still could be valid and correct too. You can still just say that there's a higher level of math. Even in math, there's Aleph Cardinals, there's multiple sets of infinity. I think there's different levels of eternity as well. So if God creates the universe from nothing, you can't actually say that you can't have free will and have God create everything. Just because it doesn't make sense to you, and saying that I can't see how it could be any other way, because an all-powerful and all-knowing being must in some way say you have limited freedom and free will, I think is an argument is from incredulity. It's basically saying that I can't envision how that could be the case, therefore it can't be the case. It's like saying, well, can God create a married bachelor, or can God lie or erase himself? And I think there's a little bit twofold for the question. For one, on the one hand, the typical answer is you could say that God, that the question just doesn't make sense because God himself or itself or herself, whatever you think God is, I think it's Jesus and the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit and the Father. But regardless, if God can overcome things like if people can say, if God can give beings ultimate free will according to their nature, but they still but God retains his all powerful and all knowing being and status, that doesn't mean that you can't have ultimate free will according to your nature. That doesn't mean that you're limited just because God can make everything. God can do things that you can't understand. Just saying that, God can't make a square circle. Well, and people say, oh, well, a square circle doesn't exist in reality. You don't know what a square circle looks like. But a square circle itself is a concept. Because you said a square circle. Sure, maybe you don't know what a square circle looks like. But concepts exist. And you are, for all intents and purposes, talking about a concept that can't actually exist in reality, right? If that's the case, then how is it possible that the concept of something, cannot be the case? Like, if concepts are real, and I'm kind of losing my train of thought. But if concepts are real, you could say a square circle is compatible with God, because as I've said before, you might not be able to understand God, everything that God can do, and you can't, because people who argue against God not being able to do something only argue from their own filtered bias subjective, and they're just saying, well, God can't do this because either the scripture says so, or God can't do this because nature or reality say so, not realizing that God can do things that don't make sense to you and I. God's concept of a square circle could look completely different from mine or anybody else's that are trying to hold God to like this subjective human experience, and I don't think it works. Saying that God must make sense in all ways, I think it's vacuous. It's an argument for incredulity again. It's not a good argument against it. Now, I just say God didn't create the universe from nothing, but I'm not going to say he can't do something. For example, people say God can't lie. I'm not so sure that's the case either, because this is a complex question, because God is complex. God is probably more complex than the universe and reality, or if you want to say they're one and the same. I don't think the universe itself is the ultimate reality. I think people just try to limit God to their own logic. They're going to lose, because just saying that God can't do something because you find it logically consistent, or they think that logic has to be consistent in reality, that it has to be in math, even because it's like, 2 plus 2 must always equal 4, because it can't otherwise, that can't happen. Or a square circle can't happen because the area of the root, or the diameter or something like that, the square in a circle cannot take up the same volume it can't make up the same volume for all angles and stuff. And because it can't do it, you can't have a square circle with the same area surface or the same diameter surface or the same whatever in math. And it's like, well, normally I agree with them. It's just that they can't know that higher dimension math or math works differently for God than anything else. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say and get across to others, is that how do you know what God can or can't do if you don't have access to God's abilities? And when I mean abilities, I mean his thinking and his intelligence, his knowledge, his power, everything. So abilities is just one way to sum up everything into one without going through them semantically and sporadically. So it's like you don't have all of the abilities of God to actually know what he can and can't do. You're just assuming that God can't do something because from a fallible standpoint you can't see any other way to do it. It's a fallacy from incredulity to say, I can't think of it, therefore God can't do it. And that is an argument from incredulity. It's an argument it's not a good argument against what God can and can't do. I think God is very capable of making a universe from nothing if he truly chose to, if he truly wanted to. And I think there's different levels of eternity, so maybe I'll get into that now. So the reason, because I'm an LDS and I believe matter is eternal, but I've always said this: if eternal thing A can affect eternal thing B, but eternal thing B can't affect eternal thing B, thing B can't affect eternal thing A, then essentially eternal thing A is more powerful than eternal thing B, even if they're both eternal. Because in the LDS scriptures, Doctrine and Covenants, section 93, verses 29 through 30, it says, the intelligence can't be, the intelligence cannot be started, it can't be created, it can't be made. So essentially your core, your intelligence, you as you being you, cannot be made. The issue with what people say is that they don't read the next verse, and this is where I disagree with the interpretation with a lot of LDS. I actually disagree with the interpretation with a lot of leaders, perhaps, with LDS leaders. So the first thing I'm going to go over is that eternal thing A can effectively be able to, it can go against eternal thing B. It can affect it. You know, they're both eternal, but one eternal can affect another eternal, and that's why I said there's different levels of eternity. There's different levels of what eternal. Yes, they're both eternal, but one is eternally God and one is eternally not God. One just eternally exists, but you don't exist as you. But you need God in any meaningful sense, because without, if you're just an eternal something, an eternal glob of goo, if you will, an eternal like black glob of goo, you are existing, but you're not existing as you. And this is what it means by in verse 30. So we went through DNC chapter section 93 verses 29. So now if you go into verse 30, and I don't have the scriptures in front of me right now, basically it sums up that if God didn't, and people can look this up, and I don't know why other LDS Mormons Church of Jesus Christ followers of Latter-day Saints don't bring this up is that, or people who are going against him, is that it says in chapter 30, it basically says, D&C 93, it says that if God didn't place the eternal intelligence in that sphere, there is no existence. Now, what does that mean, existence? Well, you could say, well, if God didn't place the eternal existence in that eternal sphere, well then the eternal existence cannot exist. And it's basically like this. If God has to place something eternal in a sphere of his own creation to exist, then how is it possible? How can God get rid of something? If something is eternal, didn't make it, and it just exists as a force of nature, it just sits there as a gob of goo, then how is it that God is like Jesus, God or whatever? How is it that God is able to rid something eternal if eternal essentially means that you can't get rid of it no matter what happens? It always existed. Well, I think it depends on how you use the word you, and it depends on how you use the word existence. Just because the eternal intelligence exists as itself, as a force of nature, and as I've said, as a lesser eternal intelligence than God, does not mean that you have any meaningful intelligence. So when it says otherwise, God has to place it in the sphere, otherwise there is no existence. What it actually, in my opinion, this is just my interpretation, is that when it says no existence, it's basically saying you can't exist meaningfully. So this is how you could reconcile that there just is multiple eternities, that God is the great eternal that can affect other eternals, but the opposite is not true. The opposite, eternal, God, can a eternal thing be? The glob of goo, right? The glob of matter. And if God didn't place it in that sphere, then either eternal B thing doesn't exist, or it doesn't exist in a meaningful way, because God has to place them in the sphere. It's not because, so that still makes God greater. Two things can be eternal, and God can still have the ultimate abilities, because eternal thing A, God, is more capable than eternal thing B. The only thing eternal B thing has is going for it, and it might not even be the case, is that it's existed alongside God eternally. Same thing with what Trinitarians say. Jesus Christ has always existed alongside the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, alongside God the Father, but they don't realize that even if eternal thing B always existed too, it can't attack the eternal thing A, which is God. It's kind of like Aleph knows the cardinality sets of infinity. Just because there are different levels of infinities, not all infinities from a set are equal. Not one infinity. It's like if you have a line, and this is going to go off on a tangent real quick, but if you have an infinite line of, like you have two different people, right? Two different lines, two different infinities. Both of the lines are infinite. Now, in line 1, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. They go on, this line goes infinitely. You can just count people infinitely, and once you get to infinity, you can still count them. You can say infinite person 1, infinite person 2, infinite person 3. Now that's a pretty big line, right? That's a pretty big line. That's an infinite line. Now in line 2, you have person 1. However, instead of multiple instead of going 1 to 2, person 1 to person 2, and that's for an infinite number of people. Line 2 would go like this. You have person 1, and then you have an infinite number of people between 1 and 2. So it would go like this. It wouldn't go from 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. It would go 1 and then 1.1 and 1.2. But even then, that might not be a good analogy, because the line between 1, like the space between line and line 2, or the multiple people between person 1 and person 2, not line 1 and line 2, but between person 1 and person 2 and line 2 would be an infinite distance. It would be an infinite number of people between those, or infinite number of something. So you go 1, infinite number of space, 2, infinite number of space, 3, infinite number, and this would go on and on and on and on and on. And that's why, even if both lines are technically infinite, the infinity's line 2 is greater than infinite. Like 2's infinite line is greater than 1's infinite line, because it's a greater infinity. There's a bigger infinity, even if they're both infinite. It's the same. I think it's the same with eternal. One eternal, because I've come to the conclusion, and it took me all my 33 years, yes, I am 33, to come to that conclusion that because I just said to myself, well, if there is, and I'm not even a good math guy, I actually suck at math too. It's just that I've done my research, and it took me a while to understand it, but infinite 1, and math, there's different levels of eternity, I think, because if eternity 1 if eternal thing 1 can interpret eternal thing 2, but not vice versa, then eternal 1 must be a greater eternal, or infinite, or eternal something, even if they're both eternal. And it's just like the same thing with the Aleph cardinals. Technically, there is no limit to a Aleph cardinal set. They're just infinities on top of infinities on top of infinities, infinities squared. That can be infinities on top of infinities on top of infinities, and on top of infinities on top of infinities. That could go on for an infinite number of time, and then eventually it gets so ridiculous that you can't really comprehend it or count them all, because there is no, apparently, I don't know if this is true, but I've been researching stuff like ZF theory and stuff, that there is no limits to internal infinities. And so heck, it is possible that there could be more eternities and ODS, or reality that we don't know of. And then those eternals, it's kind of the same, but it's kind of different. So the difference between the math, the infinities and math sets, in terms of what I propose is the infinite eternals, is that it's not a matter of in terms of infinite sets, Aleph Cardinals and whatnot, Aleph Cardinal says, my infinity is bigger than your infinity. They're both infinity, but my infinity is greater than your infinity. But then they not directly go at each other. I still want to do more research, but I think that's the gist of it, that some infinities are just bigger than the other ones. In terms of eternity, that's a little bit different, because again, it goes based on what you mean by the word. It goes based on eternity. It goes based on if you have to exist as a self, if you have to exist, if your eternity relies on another people's eternity to be yourself or to be something of value, and you, even though you're eternal, you can't that your eternity can't affect others' eternity, then one eternity, much like the Aleph stuff, must be greater than even if they're both eternal, because they're both eternal, but only one eternity is affecting a different eternity. So the eternity must be greater than the other one. That's it's hard to digest, but that's what I think. I think that just like there is different levels of eternity, there are different levels of infinity and vice versa. There's different levels of infinities and there's different levels of eternity. And so, there's that. But I think next I'm gonna maybe get into power scaling and what I think, because I love that stuff too. But I gotta charge my phone, so I'll be back. I'm just in my room right now. But yeah, I really enjoy philosophy. I enjoy theology. I enjoy my beliefs getting questioned, and I enjoy questioning other people's beliefs. But it's not a bad thing, man. So yeah, an LDS person, I think, should try to look more into what I'm saying, is that different infinities or different eternities, just because there's two different eternal things doesn't mean one eternal isn't greater than another. In fact, if eternal thing might just be able to get rid of eternal thing B. And something like, before I go into the power scaling, there's something else I thought of, and I didn't think of it for a while. So if eternal, if is it possible that we could be eternally in God's concept? So I don't know if God has concepts. He might have them, but they're just so far ahead of ours that we can't comprehend it, as I've said before. Concepts of God, if they're always eternal, if God can't turn them off, it is very possible that God could eternally have a concept of humans inside his own head that we wouldn't be able to understand, right? So in some ways, you could say that God is eternally conscripting concepts of humans in his mind eternally and constantly. So therefore, we still exist eternally in some way as a concept of God, eternally, even if we're not actually created in reality yet. although I tend to use the term loosely because do you have to be created in reality to exist? I don't think so. Well, depending on what you use reality. If you use reality interchangeably with God, then God and reality and existence are, I think, just the same thing. Um, but there's nothing wrong with saying that. I think they are the same thing, but other people can think differently too. Um, but yeah, just based on that, I think we're. Well, it was working for a while. I was gonna say my PlayStation 5 controller was. It was working for a little bit, but now it's going back to. Cause see, when I push it on the right, it's going right. But it would when you pushed it on the right, there was stick drift, and it would go to the left sometimes, as you saw earlier in the video, and as you saw there too. That's what I think. So what was I getting at? I lost my train of thought. I'm just tired. I took some medicine for like being sick and like nighttime stuff. Surprised I'm not in bed yet because I plan on because it's midnight. It's a little bit past midnight now. Well, actually, it's a lot. It's 12:46. So, and I plan on going to the gym later, maybe in like when it opens. It opens at 5 o'clock to 5 a.m., which I like. But yeah, going back to what I said before, I think that what I'm basically trying to get at is that people they try to just hold God to their own standards of understanding, and even the Bible says. Now I'm not using the Bible as a be-all catch-all thing. Oh well, you're arguing with the Bible, so it must be true, and it's like, yeah, I'm just using it to reinforce the claims, not the conclusion. Is just that God. It says in the Bible that God's ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are not our ways. So as His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, His ways are better than our ways. So God's ways are just infinitely higher that we may never be able to understand. It's kind of like asking, can you understand God fully in all His fullness? And it's like, no, I don't think you can. There's just some things that you're just not going to be able to know about God, and people need to get over it. They need to kind of just say that there are realities to things that I can't possibly know, and then people will pretend like they speak for God, which I think you can speak for God. It just has to be in reverence, and say that you can't. Asking to understand God fully and all of His abilities, or what He cannot do. It's kind of like asking to understand all of the universe. It's literally incomprehensible because the universe is really just that vast to the point that it's not even fair to try to even begin doing that. But in any case, it's actually even worse than that, because I don't think the universe, the true universe, not the observable universe, the true universe is, incomprehensible. We don't even know how big the actual universe actually is. We don't know if it's constantly static. We don't know if it's constantly moving. Apparently it's going faster than at the speed of light if it's growing. And so, that's pretty impressive. I think at the end of the day, People need to stop pigeonholing God and thinking that, well, I know this much, we've come to it, and now we can know the limits of God. It's like you don't even know the limits of the universe. How can you know the limits of God? It's kind of ridiculous in my mind that people could just hold God to the same logical, coherent standards as humans, and even then that's very dubious because you would have to appeal to something outside of your sense data, and you would have to go based on faith that the external can match up to the ideas in your head. So that would be, you would have to go through that. But anyway, that's getting into the weeds about how God can or what he can't do, and I'm saying it's very weird. In order to know what God could or could not do, or understand what he could or couldn't, you would have to have all the abilities of God in a way that you not only have them and know them, but understood them and have the intelligence and wisdom. God is, I think, far more complicated than people are making it out to be or think he is. And I think that you can only do so much. It's like why arguments against the Trinity, I think, are very bad. Like, yeah, I don't believe in the Trinity. I believe in the Godhead. But saying that because the Bible doesn't use the word Trinity, but that must mean that it can't be referring to that thing is vacuous. It's not a good argument to have. Because you're arguing from incredulity, saying, well, the Bible isn't talking about that. The authors of the Bible did not allude to that, so therefore that it can't be true, it can't be valid, it can't be substantiated, and it can't be that thing. It's very weird for people to say that something can't be a thing just because they can't understand it. So yeah. Speaking of the universe, by the way, that was a long thing, but I liked it. I love talking about this stuff. Let's talk about light speed for a second. Because light speed, and I had to look it up too, light speed in fiction and in real life work way differently. Light speed in fiction, it often ignores the consequences of it to the point to where light speed, if you went that light speed, not only would a whole bunch of things break, but if you went light speed in IRL, there would be time dilation, there would be catastrophic damage to the Earth. Heck, the Earth might not even exist. There would be time dilation, physics would break, there would be doppelganger effects, there would be a whole bunch of stuff going on. And in fiction, light speed just means going really, really fast, but nothing else. There is no time dilation. Yeah, some things can explain it within the universe, stuff like the Speed Force, but some light speed, for example, is weird. In Dragon Ball, they were light speed in early Dragon Ball Z, by the way. Light speed in Dragon Ball, at least for the characters, basically says they're just going really, really fast. Light speed is not the end-all be-all speed in fiction, because light speed in fiction is, you could just say it's slower or faster depending on how you argue stuff against stuff like the Roche limit and all that jazz. You could just, the Roche limit. I think that stuff like the Roche limit and stuff, I can just say that, like the Roche limit, the Planck lengths, that light speed could just be different in fiction than it is in real life. Because in fiction, you don't have you have to take a suspension of disbelief because otherwise a lot of things don't make sense. And as I said before, light speed in fiction just means to go really, really fast without the consequences of light speed. There's no catastrophic damage, there's no time dilation, there's no doppelganger effect. Because if you want light speed, even just walking, light speed is so actually ridiculously fast. It's ridiculously fast. You can circle the Earth in like 7 or 8 times in like a second. Right? That's a lot. Light speed is a lot faster than lightning speed. Sometimes people get it mixed up, but they're not the same at all. Light speed is way faster. Even being sub-relativistic, you would still be way fast. Also, things of mass in real life can't go at light speed because light speed is photon, like the word for C, which is photons, stuff like that. Photons, speed c, in a vacuum, which is the top speed of reality, at least as so far as we know. There is something called tachyons, but that's more tachyons are more hypothetical. They might not be real, and maybe if they did do something at CERN where they did a faster than light speed or particle, we could just say that light speed, that it would be amazing. But all in all, light speed and fiction and in real life do not match up with each other at all. And that's okay with me because there's a lot of things in fiction that you have to suspend your disbelief for real life stuff. Light speed is cool. It's just different. It's just really, really fast speed in fiction. Real life light speed is different because, as I said, there would be a whole bunch of different stuff. But what else is like light speed? There are speeds faster, and I want to go that for a second later. But light speed in fiction and light speed in real life are two completely different things. Light speed is the top speed. If the time dilation, you would get there instantly, and time basically stops or slows down significantly in real life. The faster, and it would be quite infinite mass. You would be infinitely heavy. You would basically also see, if you looked if you went light speed and you looked backwards, you would see a whole bunch of blackness, because the photons rays wouldn't be able to catch up to you. You would be going away from them so fast that the light would not be able to reach your eyes, and if you looked forward, you would be blinded because you would be experiencing time dilation, and the light, you would be basically there instantly. So, for example, if I walked at light speed to, like say a store, I would get there instantly. Of course, you would get there instantly too, basically, because it would basically look like you're teleporting. It would basically look like you're teleporting. The reason why it would basically look like you're teleporting, because it would be ridiculously fast to the point that the brain wouldn't register. I mean, it has trouble registering lightning speed, and that's way fast too. It's just not nearly as fast as even sub-relativistic speeds. And so you would get there basically in an instant, you will leave in an instant, and on the Earth, it would be way faster because the distance traveled is much less. Remember, light takes like 8 minutes from the Earth to the sun, or I think I read it something like that. All in all, it takes time. It's not really instant, even if it seems instant. That's more perspective, and there's that more time dilation. So another cool thing is that with time dilation, if time slows down or basically stops for the person who's going at light speed, for the participants or people that are watching, they would be a little bit older depending on the time and distance. So if you went from the sun to the earth at light speed, however long it takes you to get there, they would be that much older. Because time, it's like light speed in real life, as I've said before, it's way different. It's not like a speed and it's not like the speed in fiction where it just says, well, yeah, this game is still alive, barely. Yeah, it is alive, barely, but I don't care if it is. I just enjoy playing against bots because, believe it or not, I don't like playing with other people much. Some of it is shyness, some of it is not being interested in the games my friends play, and some of it is because I'm not charismatic and I'm boring. I'm a boring person to I'm a boring person to be with or talk to, I think. So, but as I was saying, light speed and fiction is different than light speed in reality. Now, to go past the speeds, FTO, MFTO, and fiction, I'll just say this: FTO and MFTO, and before you get to like stuff like infinite speed and accessible speed, immeasurable speed, and irrelevant speed, FTO and MFTO are just faster than light, massively faster than light. They're just going faster. They just mean they're going faster and faster. Just means, and fiction, because now we gotta use fiction stuff, because there is, at least so far as I've known, there is nothing faster in real life than light speed. Well, other than maybe the expansion of space, that's probably the only thing that I think is faster. You could just say that. The speed of space expansion is faster than the speed of light. So but that's a different kind of speed. Well, it's not really even a speed. It's more like an expansion of kind of like a rubber band. But it's still not a bad thing. It's just a little bit faster than light, because light can't escape black holes. But light can't escape black holes. But going back to the fictional speed stuff for a second, So I don't exactly remember in power scaling. There's infinite speed, immeasurable speed, inaccessible speed, irrelevant speed. Infinite speed is you can cross an infinite distance of time in a finite number of seconds. So, this is just going to be an example. Let's say the universe is infinite in size. Let's just grant it for the sake of argument. The infinite universe in size, it would be, if there was an infinite universe in size, the universe, and you could cross it in, like, let's say 3 seconds, right? You can cross the universe in 3 seconds. That's, and you cross that infinite speed in 3 seconds. Infinite speed, because if you just went at FDO and the speed of light and the speed of FDO, you wouldn't be able to. You would basically be able to be stuck going an infinite distance. It's kind of like an infinite hallway. If there's an infinite hallway and you have to, if you're not fast enough, you would essentially be running in that hallway forever because you could never get. How do you get it to an end of an infinite hallway? Well, your speed would have to be greater than infinite, even if that infinite takes time. So, like, if someone took 3 seconds to reach the end of an infinite time, versus they took 10 seconds to reach the end of an infinite, something like an infinite hallway, the difference between 3 seconds and 3 seconds and 10 seconds is like 7 seconds, right? So if it's 7 seconds, then they're both infinite, but the one who went over the infinite hallway in 3 seconds is still a greater infinite speed than the one who took like 10 seconds to get. They both have infinite speed, but it's a different level of infinite speed. The next speed tier, actually, I might have to watch Surfbone talk about this. He's a pretty good power scaler too. In fact, that's where I learned a lot of some of the stuff about the speed scaling came in. So the next speed is either inaccessible speed or infinite. Well, no, not infinite speed. The next speed is inaccessible speed. The ability to move or travel in a zero time. So, for example, let's say inaccessible speed. If you had inaccessible speed, you would be able to move in a realm with a zero time, because you would have to have a greater infinite speed to move in a realm with no time. So, for example, let's say I magically got transported to a place that I can't actually. What if I went to a place that I can't actually observe? I can't actually move in. Well, then, the most you couldn't say that I had inaccessible speed, because inaccessible speed, people are able to move in realms with there's a time stop. So if I got transported to an infinite speed dimension, or a dimension of zero time and zero space, and I was stuck, then I would not be able to move. I would just be stuck there, frozen in time forever. I'd be essentially just frozen in time. But if I had inaccessible speed, I would be able to move in that zero time realm, because I would be faster than the infinite speed required to be able to even move in the first place. It's not just enough to have to move it's not just enough to move to cross an infinite distance in a finite amount of time. Now I have to cross a distance with 0 time, and that's greater because speed divided by 0 is still 0. So even if it took you a infinite distance, you wouldn't be able to do so. So inaccessible speed is a greater speed because you have to be able to move in a realm with no time at all. Is it inaccessible speed or infinite? No, it's inaccessible speed. Yeah, infinite speed, and then it goes inaccessible speed. Immeasurable speed is being able to run forward or backwards in time through sheer speed. So the reason why this is impressive is that using a finite time to move an infinite distance isn't bad. Being able to move in 0 time is not bad either. Pretty good. Being able to move through time is something else entirely, because now you're able to finish a race before you even leave, and that's impressive because you could essentially run backwards or forwards to the end of time, something the other less of the two don't possess. So you could essentially run backwards before you were born or after you died, and you would still be able to, and that's impressive because you can do a lot of different crazy things if you have that speed. And the last speed is called irrelevant speed, as in a speed so fast that you can't actually really quantify it because it just breaks the speed formula. I mean, they all do to some degree, but irrelevant speed really breaks the speed formula because you're going, you can be in multiple places at once at one time, and it doesn't even have to be like the same time space and anything. So a good idea of irrelevant speed is that, say if I am both in the future and both in the past at once and the present at the same time, at the same speed, like just because of my speed movement. Well, I'm not even going through time. Well, I am, but I'm not. You're not just going through time through your speed. You are existing in a different timeline altogether at once. It's not another version of you. It's just because of you're so fast that the laws of physics or anything about laws don't even apply to you. And you could say that for other things too. For example, if you wanted to, let's say you wanted to be in a one dimension or out of verso place at once, you could do that through sheer speed. That you could be in two places at once that don't really make sense on like a logical scale. So, I wonder what's another good one. Another good one is that you can be fighting two different fights at one time in two different places of time or dimensions. If I want to, or maybe just on the same place, I'll keep it, I won't go to the dimensions because that could essentially would have to be explained about their mode of being themselves, although maybe it doesn't always have to be. But let's say, for example, I want to fight two different people at once at the same time in a different and maybe essentially different space. And when I say space, I'm not talking about a different dimension or different reality. I'm talking about a different space in terms of like location. If I want to say, I have, irrelevant speed, and I want to fight someone on, like in the sun. Let's say, for example, I could survive the sun's rays and stuff, and I wasn't affected by them. I could fight with someone in the sun and the core itself, and I could be off, I don't know, having a sandwich on Earth at the same time due to my speed, and I would still be in both places. It wouldn't be just a clone of me. It wouldn't be just another version. It wouldn't be another version of you. It would be you. You would be able to be at two places at once with just one person, and it wouldn't make sense. But in second thought, now that I think about it, it would make sense for a two-dimensional being and three-dimensional being. If you wanted to say that you could just run to a 2D dimensional plane of existence, you would be able to, if you could. But I think that's more of a state of being, and that's why I would rather keep it to like the same time space. Not because that I believe that a third dimensional immeasurable speed can't run to a two-dimensional place while still being in the third dimension just through speed. But I think that requires more explanation than semantics, and I'd rather just make it easier to digest. So, irrelevant speed is basically that, you can be in two different places at once, even if it doesn't seem to make very much sense. And I think that's pretty cool and awesome, because inaccessible speed would basically mean you could be off fighting somewhere, and you could be off for a sandwich, or you could be so fast that you could just cover the whole Earth in you, and it would still be the same you. They wouldn't be an after image. They wouldn't be a doppelganger effect. They would be you in every sense. And I think that's why irrelevant speed is so crazy, because you can essentially just be in two or more places at once, not through your being, but through your sheer movement speed alone. That's why it's called irrelevant, because they put the other speeds to it. It basically puts the other speeds to, it puts other speeds to shame, and it does it quite badly. It puts other speeds to shame. Now out of Verso stuff, and it's the same thing with Universal. If you take it to its utmost, Universal, and I'm getting tired, Universal stuff or above doesn't make much sense, because we can't quantify what that would look like. We can't know what it would actually be like to be above Universal. So we kind of have to play the hypothetical game. But to not bog it down too much, is that the universal, like being above universal, hyperversal, multiversal, I think it's pretty easy to get to it. Universal, it means you can destroy the universe. Universal Plus means you can destroy one or more universes, and an attack or an ability, I think, or something like that. Multiverse contains multiple universes or multiple multiverses, I would say. Then you would, multiverse. There's different levels of multiverse, but that's kind of the gist of it. Then you got hyperverse, which is higher dimensions, because that goes with like spatial dimensions, not just temporal ones. Spatial dimensions, 4D, 5D, etc. Higher dimension you go. Higher dimension you go, the worse, the harder it is, because to use feats, because at some point you just go high, so high that the feats you can't actually really use them. You actually have to go based on like either the cosmology or something else that you might not actually be able to know. But hyperverse level is essentially 11D or above, and it's for characters who are almost above the dimension tier entirely. I think once you get to 12, then you start getting to those hyperverse and hyperversal level plus, and then once you get to something like low outer versal, then it starts to get crazy, because in order to reach the tail of low outer versal in the first place, you would have to go beyond the infinite dimensions, because infinite dimensions, which can be counted within Hilbert spaces, are still, in theory, stuff like that. You're still bound by dimension, even if those dimensions are infinite. It's kind of like saying an infinite 2D thing. You could put infinite squares into a cube and it still wouldn't do anything to make the square fill up, because a 2D thing only has length, like two sides, right? It has length and width, but it doesn't have depth or height, or it has height or sideways. Basically, it only has two axes instead of three, so infinite 3D is greater than infinite 2D, even if they're both infinites. As I said before, universal is kind of the same way. But even infinite dimensions, as I said, infinite dimension is still infinite dimensions are still bound by dimensionality, so it wouldn't qualify for low out of versal. But finite dimensions to infinite dimensions, but in order to be qualified, not out of versal, not out of versal, but just low out of versal, you would have to be beyond and transcend the extension of any spatial dimensionality. I'm kind of watching Sirth Bones' video. I do like his videos a lot. But, so for example, if you're like a 12D being, and there's a being higher than that, like you transcend it physically, I would say you at least qualify for low out of versal. Yeah, low out of verso is more, I think, of a physical thing. If you are low out of verso, your being, your being itself is beyond that. It's not really being beyond the concept of dimensions in a conceptual way. It's more so that your being, your existence is beyond that physically. That's low out of verso, I would say. It's more of a physical thing than a conceptual thing. Now, if you want to talk about baseline out of verso, not low out of verso, is being beyond the concept. So they're both beyond outer verso. They're both beyond high hyperverso and hyperverso, and beyond dimensions and finite dimensions and infinite dimensions. The big difference between the two is that the big difference between the two is the big difference between low out of verso and baseline out of verso is they both are above it, but low out of verso I think is more the object and thing itself, but out of verso, the baseline one, is that you are essentially above the concept of dimensions. You're not just above it. You're not just above dimensions in a existence sense. You are above the concept of dimensionality entirely. So, for example, like let's say you have outer verso being thing A, and a concept that is above the concept of the low outer verso, that isn't just like a physical thing, but it's a concept of that. For example, low outer verso thing A is above it transcends it transcends the dimensions, but conceptually, like it transcends it physically, but it's not above the concept of it. It just exists above it. So if you exist above something, I guess maybe you could say you do exist above it, but that's only really in a being of physical sense. The baseline outer verso, or outer verso thing B, is above the high hyperverso thing in the same way the low outer verso being thing is. It exists beyond that. But it's not just existing, it's not just in a state of existence, it's a state of conceptual existence that thing B, the thing A, doesn't have. Low outer verso thing A is above high hyperverso things, or high hyperverso existence, but that's more so, it's a state, it's more a physical state of being. That doesn't mean you're above the concept. For example, I, as a 3D thing, a 3D being, I'm above a 2D thing. I'm a 3D being. I'm above a 2D being. But that doesn't mean I'm above the concept itself as a 3D being. I think that's more so what's happening here. And I think that's what Surfbone is saying in his video. He's not saying that you're not above said thing, but you're not above the concept. You're just above it in terms of like a space. It's kind of like a 3D being, right? A 3D being can be above a 2D being, but not above the concept of the 3D being. You can still not be above a concept of something, even if you're above or if you're not transcending it. because the reason why being above the concepts is so impressive is that it makes the thing possible in the first place. So what's a greater outerverse? Being just above a hyperversal being, or being above the concept or being above the concept of a low outer thing, or outer versal being. So you're not just an outer versal being, you're above the concept of what it means to be that thing in the first place. The concept allows the thing to do in the first place. It's like a universal rule for allowing the thing to be even possible in the first place. The concept of an outerversal being is greater than a low outerversal. The concept of an outerversal being is greater than the existence of a low outer being, because the concept is on a higher plane of existence rather than just existing as that thing. It's still above it though. So that's why low outerversal is more of a physical existence, I say. But outerversal, baseline outerversal, is just above the concept. It's just above the concept or dimension. You're not just above dimensions in a physical sense. You transcend, you are above the concept of dimensions. Being beyond something is different than saying you are beyond the concept of that said thing. Being above infinite dimensions is cool. You get to low outer. But being above the concept of infinite dimensions is more impressive, because being above the concept of it's a greater level of being, because you allow the low outerversal thing to do it in the first place. Then there's also high outerversal. There's also high outerversal, extraversal, boundless, and I'll get to those in a little bit. But I'm just trying to see about it. But I believe high outerversal, at the very least, high outerversal is to the same extent that the other ones is, but I'm not really certainly so sure yet. Alright, yeah. Okay, so yeah, the concept of something is greater than just existing above it. I know it sounds weird because they're both kind of like meta existence, but being above the concept of something is greater than just existing above it. Because while they both exist above the concept of it, one does it in a more meta way that is more impressive, because it's not just being above the concept of something. It's not just being above something, it's being above the concept of it. And that's why it's so different. And so what's harder and higher it is because being above the concept, I think, is a lot more is 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 greater than that. Hmm. So, Hayata Verso, based on what I seen Surfbone, he basically gives the definition like this. He says, Hayata Verso is basically transcendental or transcendent to the extent that the difference between three normal dimension spatial beings and an outer verso being is the difference between high outer verso and outer verso. So it's a high outer verso is way bigger than outer verso. So yeah, it's way bigger. So that's pretty impressive. But there are tiers above high outer verso, which I will go through, I think, a little. At least my interpretation. So yeah, high outer verso is pretty high up there. Because as I said, high outer verso is way above an outer verso thing, and that thing is way above low outer verso. So if I had to sum it up, there is existing beyond something, there's being beyond the concept of something, and then there's being above, then there is something above that is hard to pin down or quantify. Then above that, you could say is extraversal, boundless stuff. And the boundless stuff is kind of weird because it's more so abstraction and stuff. You can't exactly, you don't exactly have the feats to quantify how you would measure a boundless being or a extraversal being. But if I had to say a being like SCP-3812, the white light, or I am that I am from the Word of Darkness, I think are great picks. I think they could be omnipotent, maybe, although I don't think true omnipotence is in fiction. But a boundless is just basically, well, you're basically everywhere. You can affect everything. You're basically omnipotent. You exist everywhere. You can do anything. You can. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's basically just above everything in that verse. Who wins between two beings that are both boundless or extraversal? I just say extraversal and boundless are. I think they're the same. I don't think they're metafictional, and I'll even get into that too later. But depending on who two boundless beings is, I guess you would have to go based on somewhat maybe like math, and then you would have to go based on cosmology, on why. Because once you get up to a certain level, you can't really. It's hard to use destructive feats because there's only so much to destroy. Because then you have to get more into the concepts of transcendentals and more weird stuff that you can't exactly depict on on a screen so easily. But I say boundless and extrovert, so kind of in the similar tier. I've heard there's layers into boundless too. I've heard there isn't. But I would say SCP-3812, the white light from Ruckaverse, and I am that I am from the Word of Darkness go into it. Now, who do I think wins between SCP-3812, I am that I am, and the Word of Darkness? I think I am that I am in SCP-3812. I think it's a toss-up between the two. You could argue for both either way, and I wouldn't blame you if you did, because I still think that there's still more capability of being able to do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's very cool. And so what do I want to do? Oh yeah. So basically what I'm saying also is okay, so what I'm saying is that oh wait, so like two boundless beings, one the one with the bigger cosmology I think would create arguments is more of a winner. But it's kind of, I think it's hard to do because, as I said, you get to a certain level and you can't, there's only so much you can do before feats don't, like once you get up to a high enough level, feats I think matter less and less because they're both boundless. Like, how do you determine which boundless character? It's another boundless character, and it's like, well, kind of hard to substantiate because they're not the same boundless level. They're not the same level, and so it's pretty hard to do. But I think that the one with the bigger cosmology wins, and I think that's where it's just going to stay and lay, in my opinion. Now, as for like metafictional stuff, like some people say that for Cosmic Armor Superman, though I don't know if he qualifies for that. Some people say it's more like just Deadpool breaking the fourth wall. And I'll go into, I don't think there's very much characters that go to metafictional at all. I think the strongest character in fiction for me, if I had to choose, would either be God Fusion Goku, and he would go in the metafictional, or the other one that I think you could make an argument for is the White Light, because the White Light uses mathematics. The guy who was a mathematician, he wrote the book, and the White Light scales above SCP-3812, which is supposed to apparently always transcend the narrative. The White Light of the Ruckaverse is apparently even above things like the I am that I am from the Word of Darkness, and that's impressive because the Word of Darkness is not. It's actually not a. It's not a cheap. It's pretty high up there on the power scale for anybody. The I am that I am. The Word of Darkness cosmology is very big, and they're very strong, and they can affect a lot of realities. So the main reason why the White Light scales higher is because then I am from the Word of Darkness is that it is a infinite. Infinities like out of cardinals, and you can use math. And the White Light is just infinitely transcending infinite. In short, Aleph Cardinals, and it's an infinite, it's squared, it's infinity squared by infinite squared, and it's doing that all over, and it's now the Word of Darkness is pretty powerful. It's got a good cosmology, but I think the White Light from the Ruckaverse is just stronger and more powerful, better abilities, able to constantly transcend. It's like the White Light is SCP-3812 on steroids. The SCP-3812, for all of its power and all of its infinite transcendence, it doesn't have, I don't think, the math tiers to deal with stuff like the White Light. I think the SCP-3812 and I Am That I Am from the Word of Darkness are closer, but I think the White Light might be the strongest, most powerful character in fiction, right beside God Fusion Goku. God Fusion Goku essentially fused with a real-life audience, and that audience, even though it's a fictional audience of the real-life world counterparts, it's fusing with a fictional audience of real-life people. It shook the chairs at the 4D experience. So if God Fusion Goku did fuse with the audience, and if you take it hyper literally, as in he literally did fuse with the audience, which he actually didn't. It's not like you can see God Fusion Goku walking down the street, but a fictional version of the real life audience. And if you want to argue it from metafictional, then God Fusion Goku might be the strongest character in fiction. I think maybe besides from the White Light from the Ruckaverse itself, because he isn't just you. He is literally you, and if you see fiction as fiction, then you would be stronger. It's not like the Jump Force Goku character, although Jump Force Goku is still very strong. He's an outer-versal being. He was able to go against Prometheus. The reason why I put God Fusion Goku even higher than Jump Force Goku, Xena Goku, CC Goku, is that Jump Force Goku is able to just fuse with the audience and can be argued for a metafictional space. The other ones cannot do that. As powerful as Jump Force Goku is, he's still just boundless or high outer versal. It sounds ridiculous, but that's very weak compared to a metafictional Goku. Because if you want to downplay God Fusion Goku and say, well, the actual representation is that he just fused with the audience, and it's not supposed to be a metafictional. Metafictional take is that then you could just say that he still layers into high outer versal or boundless, because he's still interacting with a fictional version of you, not the real life version of you, which that might seem weird because I already said it's a fictional version of the real people, but let me explain. If you go the route of saying he fused with the real life versions of the fictional world and that makes him fictional, then he is essentially fused with them, the real life world, because the real life world needed to be there to interact with God Fusion Goku on a meta level, even if he didn't actually do it, because the movie said that he did, but he didn't. But if you're taking the God Fusion Goku as literal just fiction, he literally doesn't fuse with the audience, but a fictional version of the fictional audience, then that's different. So basically the difference between God Fusion Goku is that you either say, for the eyeball, you say that God Fusion Goku fused with the fictional audience of the real life people, or he fused with the, or you can lowball it and say he fused with the fictional version of the fictional audience. So that's how I would do it. That's how I would argue it. But either way, even if you want to downplay him, he's still a lot more powerful than a lot of people give him credit for. In fact, there's arguments too that even just regular Super, not even the non-canon versions, well, it's kind of, I say it non-canon now, it's kind of hard to say because the Super remake is going to take some stuff from the manga, it's going to keep some stuff from the anime, and it's going to do its own thing. So yeah, it's gonna do its own thing. It's gonna do its own thing, but I would say that yeah, I would say yeah, I would say that that's the best way to do it. Either say God Fusion Goku fused with a fictional God Fusion Goku fused with fictional audience of the fictional representation of the audience, or a fused with a fictional audience of the real life audience of the real life interpretation. So either way, you're going to be good stuff on that part, and I think that's why God Fusion Goku is a high character. But going back to the canon Goku for a second, you could make a case that Goku Blue, back in the early days of Dragon Ball Super, faced a Raleigh. A Raleigh, you could argue, is high hyperversal, if not out of versal, or at least low out of versal, because she's infinitely cutting her own page an infinite number of times. And if you do that an infinite number of times, you infinite transcend your own existence and transcendence and stuff like that. And so I think I think that you could just argue with that. God and Goku in Blue, just Blue was able to stalemate her, and this was in at least early Dragon Ball Super. He's way stronger now. And let's see who else. Beerus was able to Hakai Dr. Slump, and he was able to essentially Hawkeye summon of Araleigh's character out of existence. So if you put and say Raleigh is an out of versal, which you can interpret it that way, then it's very possible that Beerus has a level of out of versal power. It happened in the manga, it happened in the anime, it probably happened in the new anime too, because the new anime I think is going to be the official canon more than the canon now, because they're starting over, they're going to redo some things from scratch, they're going to have manga elements, they're doing the moral arc to the Galactic Patrol arc, and that's going to come out for the anime. It'll be interesting to see if it's a one-to-one base for the manga, if they're going to try to copy the manga, or if they're going to do their own stuff. If I were them, I would take from the manga, but keep it more original too. So that's what I would do. The power scale is going to get weird, but before I go, because I'm pretty tired, it was a nice stream. It was an enjoyable stream. But before I go, I want to give my case for Universal Sukuna, Universal JJK, and moving in a realm with 0 time for Gojo, so that would either give him immeasurable speed or inaccessible speed. The reason why, I think it's inaccessible speed when you move in 0 time. I'm not sure. But if you Gojo's Infinite Void was able to hold a universe inside of it, and at least in the anime. And if you want to say that the Infinite Void is universal because it contains a universe inside, it's possible that the domain expansion is that powerful, at least for Gojo. You could also argue that Yorozu was able to make a perfect sphere with infinite points, and all the places of the sphere essentially being universal could be infinite. You would needed infinite points infinitely to do that, and Maharaga was able to cut through it. Maharaga is weaker than Gojo or Sukuna, and he's not as fast. So if you want to take that argument, then Maharaga, Gojo, and Sukuna scale the universal above. I made the case for Gojo and Maharaga because Maharaga was able to punch through the infinite sphere with the sword of with the sword of extermination. Gojo, as I said before, you could make an argument that he has a universe in his domain expansion, maybe even higher, but I think you can get him to universal. But even without the domain expansion, you can just get him to universal by saying he scales above a being who is able to take out an infinite sphere, and an infinite sphere might be universal in density or size or whatever, because it requires infinite points. It's like universal in a way. It's, because there's infinite points. And so Sukuna matches Gojo. So Sukuna would just go to, actually I think Sukuna is above Gojo, I think stronger. And Sukuna is stronger than Maharaga. Both Gojo and Sukuna were able to tame Maharaga with Fire Arrow, and Fire Arrow for Sukuna, and 200% hollow, unlimited hollow purple for Gojo, and they were stronger than a person who took away an infinite point, the perfect sphere from Yorozu. Maharaga is stronger than that perfect sphere, which means you would skip universal because a perfect sphere, as it says in the Jujutsu Kaisen from Yorozu, a liquid metal construct created through her construction technique that allows 0 contact points, resulting in infinite pressure, and Maharaga was just able to get out of it. He was just able to destroy it. So Maharaga is essentially scaling to an infinite pressure that is essentially universal pressure, and it just bypassed it. So this is impressive. This is pretty impressive. And Gojo and Sukuna, even without the word slash, what the slash says, it can cut all existence, it can cut the word, it can cut space, and we see a picture manga panel that it does cut space. Depending on how you interpret, you can get Gojo and Sukuna via different ways. You can get them universal via the attacks, domain expansion for Gojo, the word cutting slash for Sukuna, or even without using those, you can just say they both scale above a being that was able to withstand infinite pressure, which is universal. So yeah, it's pretty high, and the reason why the infinite sphere is universal, at least essentially, is because based on power scaling, it could be used as a universal if it's infinite pressure. So if you and yeah, there's different ways to argue against it or for it, but that's why there's a low ball interpretation. That's why there's a high ball interpretation. And Maharaga was able to get rid of it. So, and Gojo's hollow purple and Sukuna's Fuga was able to tame Maharaga and basically destroy him. And they didn't use their powerful domain extension. Well, Sukuna's domain expansion might not be as strong as his word cutting slashes, but Gojo's universal domain might just be as strong as him, maybe if not stronger. But then again, the domain expansion is like the ultimate. It's like the ultimate status as a sorcerer. And Sukuna's is open barrier, Gojo's is closed, but they're perfectly matched with each other. They hit each other and then they cancel each other's out. But Sukuna's, at least on the first clash, and they were able to open up their clashes 5 times. When originally you can really only do it once a day because of how much cursed energy and how much it takes to actually be able to open it. They did it 5 times in that one battle. So, at least with the Sukuna's case, the cleave or dismantle, I can't remember, but the slashes basically cut you before they appear. Their main expansions kind of just spawn on you, which means they might not be able to dodge. But that's how you get the universal JJK, universal Maharaga, they're even light speed. Kenjaku was able to activate his anti-black hole. And I know people rank off the black hole, but I don't think it's nearly as good as people think. It's impressive, but I don't think it's impressive as Sukuna's flame arrow, or Sukuna's domain expansion, or Sukuna's word slash, or Gojo's domain expansion, or Gojo's just being above universal in general, or Kenjaku's being able to react to the black hole, which could be a light speed feat, one of them, or Maharaga's sort of extermination, being able to get through infinite pressure, which could be universal for that. So I think lowball, you can just say that he attacked a infinite pressure, but it wasn't truly infinite, at least in terms of size, but there is infinite pressure, but it wasn't. So it's not universal, but it's still very good. It's just not bad. If you want to say that, then it is, Sukuna and Gojo's good, both Maharaga being who was able to get rid of a highball universal attack, or universal attack that has infinite amount of pressure and an infinite size. It's a perfect sphere. And that's impressive. So, and the other last thing before I go is that a light speed for Sukuna and Gojo, and them being able to have an accessible speed being able to move in zero time. For one, Gojo moved in zero time. The prison realm that could be to its infinity, but Sukuna matches his speed. He's supposed to be like Gojo's equal or better, so you could just use Gojo's skill of speed to put it to Sukuna, and you can just say Sukuna matches or a little bit surpasses Gojo's speed. If that's the case, if you highball it to that, then Sukuna would also have inaccessible speed because he managed an inaccessible person going at inaccessible speed and moving into a prison realm, which is a realm of no time, according to Gojo. Also, you could say that even without it, that Sukuna and Gojo still scale to FDL. And the reason why I can say that is because there's a character called Kashimo. He's the god of light, the god of lightning, whatever. But he uses electromagnetic waves, Kashimo, and he uses it against he used it against Sukuna, and Sukuna was able to dodge it. Electromagnetic radiation moves at the speed of light, which are light speed, which would mean you would have FTL. So, if I highballed or linked Sukuna and Gojo, I would give them inaccessible speed and at least universal levels of attack. Universal levels. So, that's it. It's been a fun stream. I'm tired. And I need to get ready for later today because it's 2:07. That was a fun stream. I had fun. I talked a lot about a lot of different things. And I think it's one of my best streams yet. Alright. Until the next one.